So we'll begin. Be'ezer Hashem Yisbarach. Today's class is dedicated in honor of the birthdays of the members of the freed family. Mazel Tov and happy birthday. We have Shmuel Ben Yitzchak HaKoyin turning 60. Reishis Goyim Amalek, and his grandson Avram Moshe Ben Yaakov HaKoyin turning 18 years old. Chai. Dedicated by Rabbi Elliot Kaplan. Thank you very, very much. And Mazel Tov and happy birthday. Reishis Goyim Amalek. We've been learning here the Maamar by the Lubavitcher Rebbe of Purim Tovshin Tesvav, Purim 1955, which begins with the pasuk in Parshas Reishs Goyim Amalek v'charisai adei ovid. Amalek is the genesis of all the nations, and the end of Amalek is that he will perish. And in order to explain Amalek, it's the genesis of all the Goyim, of all the Reishis Goyim Amalek. Bilam says Reishis Goyim Amalek v'charisai adei ovid. In order to explain what this means, like everything in Torah, it's not just a physical mitzvah, but it's also a spiritual mitzvah. Meaning it's a mitzvah inside the person, including remembering Amalek and wiping out Amalek. So he began a whole long explanation to understand the whole system of Avodas Hashem connected to the 5 levels of the soul. It says in Medrash that the soul has 5 names: Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, and Yechida. And therefore the whole avodah of a person during one's life revolves around these 5 states of the soul, because that's the operating system, so to speak, of the soul. And that's what we say, that we have 5 different names, 5 different levels or dimensions of the soul. And he started to say that the main avodah is what's called with the koiches pnimim. Koiches pnimim means the faculties of the soul that are integrated and manifested more consciously within the human body. And then you have the 2 last ones, which is Chaya Yechida, as we will see. We're going to shift now to those 2. They're called koiches makifim. The difference of pnimi and the difference of pnimi and makif. Pnimi means from the word pnim, when something goes inside. Pnimius is called pnimi, meaning it's integrated. What does that mean, spiritually speaking? When something is integrated in the person, it can be embodied consciously. So it could be a manifestation of it. That's called a koyach pnimi, a koyach that relates to something pnimius in a way that is relatable to the container, to the vessel. A koyach makif means it's also present and it also has tremendous influence, but not necessarily in a conscious way. Sometimes it can have even a deeper influence, but it's not in a way that's integrated, and that's why sometimes it's much more powerful, because it's happening on a level and in a way that is beyond my knowledge, beyond my awareness, beyond my consciousness. And as always, there could be makif of kedusha, there could be makif of not kedusha. It could be something very powerful and positive in a constructive way, and it could be something very powerful, but it's not necessarily constructive. It could be the opposite. So nefesh, ruach, neshama are those parts of the soul, so to speak. I'm using the word parts because I don't have another word, but it's not really parts. But it's those, let's say, frequencies of the soul. That's probably a better word, that are more integrated within the person, or at least they could be much more integrated. In that itself, you have nefesh, and you have ruach, and you have neshama. Neshama is connected to bina, nishmas shadai tevinim, the pasuk says. The neshama gives them understanding. It gives tevinim, so it's connected to bina. In Kabbalah and Chassidus and Machshava, neshama is usually connected with seichel, cognition, awareness, understanding, particularly bina, nishmas shadai tevinim. Ruach is connected with midas. Ruach is connected to leiv, heart, midas, the emotional experiences of a person. And you have nefesh, which is connected to the kaved, the liver, and that represents the capacity of the soul to implement, to execute. It relates more to maisa, to action. And that's what he started to explain at length, that the whole avodah of the person is with neshama and ruach and nefesh. And we have two souls. We have a nefesh alakis and a nefesh abahamas. And both, like the animal soul has nefesh ruach neshama. The divine soul has nefesh ruach neshama. And the avodah, nefesh ruach neshama of the divine soul can ultimately communicate and elevate and sublimate and work with the nefesh ruach neshama of the animal soul.
I just have a question.
Yeah.
Was there a paradigm shift in how Chassidus worked behind it? And I don't want to derail it because I know you want to go quicker, but the concept of being kind to your nefesh bahamias and correcting it and elevating it, was there a prior way to view it, which is still existent today, which is more along the lines of supplementing it in a way that it represses it?
That's an excellent question. You're asking if there was a paradigm shift.
It's not my question, it's my better half's question.
Okay. You know, as you started to ask it, I was suspicious of that.
Because you have to say it over B'Shem Omer, right?
Very good. Very good. You were listening yesterday. Davar b'Shem Omer. It's really a wonderful question. If there is a paradigm shift in Tanya and Chassidus in general about how we deal with the animal soul. Sublimating versus repressing. So, I'll just say 2 points. Number one, generally, everything that's discussed in Chassidus, you have earlier. You know, it's not like the Baal Shem Tov created a new Judaism, chas v'shalom. Everything you could find, everything is there earlier. What I would say is that Chassidus, it zoomed in, accentuated, emphasized, and brought to light certain dimensions or aspects that could have been either not noticed so much or not emphasized so much, or maybe hidden. If we can use a mashal from science, physics, if a scientist or physicist says, I discovered something in the genome or in a cell or in an atom that I invented, right? Then it's not science. It's I discovered something that was always there, but we never knew about it, right? And that's there's something called an invention. You build a new toy, a new machine, but you're using the resources and you're using the realities that were always there, even though we weren't aware of them. Electricity was not something that they invented 150 years ago, right? Or germs, or viruses, or bacteria, or fungi, or electrons, or the complexity of a cell, or neurons, etc. It's things that we simply didn't have the tools always to appreciate, but they were always there. So I would say the same is true in Pnimiyus HaTorah. When we say Pnimiyus HaTorah, it means it's the Pnimiyus of the Torah. So you open up a Chumash, that's what it says. You open up a Gemara, that's what it says. So that's just one point that's important to emphasize. Right? It's just with different generations, and as the world progresses towards Geula, so deeper dimensions within Yiddishkeit are revealed, but they're revealed, they're not created. The Gemara says in Megillah, Kol Masha Talmud Vasik Asad L'Chadish, Hakal Nitin L'Moshe Misinai. Anything that a student will ever innovate was given to Moshe from Sinai. What does that mean? It doesn't mean it's not an innovation. It doesn't mean, you don't get credit, you're just plagiarizing Moshe Rabbeinu. It means if it's real Torah, it was already given in Sinai. It could be it was concealed then. The principles were given and you figured out that prat, that detail. But if it's Moshe from Sinai. The fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Rebbe Rashab, in his writings about learning, so he was writing about certain places where they learn, and the main thing is a chiddush. The main thing is not to understand. The main thing is, did you say something new? So he said, actually, in humor, he says, they actually do real chiddushim, because it's chiddushim that were not given l'Moshe Sinai. He says it's real chiddushim. It's taka chiddushim. He said the greatest compliment is that it's not a chiddush. That's number one. But number two, saying that there was a paradigm shift. Because even though you have that path earlier, like I said, but still, generally speaking, very often the conversation was crushing the Yetzer Hara. In fact, the term that was usually used was Yetzer Hara, not Nefesh HaBahamis. And one of the differences is, and Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz, Even Yisrael, says this in his introduction to Tanya very beautifully. He says, with Yetzer Hara, the main battle is a battle with a sworn enemy. With a sworn enemy, with an enemy inside of you. Yetzer Hara means an inclination to evil. Inclinations to evil, you either have to suppress or obliterate, or at least, occupy and control with force. In Tanya, he also uses that word, but the primary word he introduces is Nefesh HaBahamis. Nefesh HaBahamis is not evil. Nobody's going to say a behemoth is evil. On the contrary, Tsar Balechayim, you learn Bab Mitzvah, Tsar Balechayim, you're not allowed to aggravate an animal. Toiv Hashem lakol v'racham aval kol masav. Hashem's compassion is for everything, every single animal. The Gemara tells a story in Maseches Ksuvas that Rabbi, the editor of the Mishnah, Rabbeinu Yehuda HaKadosh, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, we call him Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, the editor of the Mishnah, Rabbi Judah the Prince, he once saw a calf. There was a sheichet, a slaughterer, taking a calf, an egel to the shchita, to slaughter him, and the calf ran under the bosom of Rebbe to be protected. Animals are sensitive. So Rebbe sent him off and said, Lekach no tzarta, you were created for this. And he sent him back. And he became ill for 12 or 13 years because of his lack of sensitivity to the animal. And what I want to explain is lack of sensitivity comes back when you're a very sensitive person. It came back to him as an illness. It's not like when we look reward and punishment, it's like you did this, I'll punish you. But it's something that comes back. The lack of sensitivity for such a soul, for another person, what did he say? What do you want from the shayt? What do you want? I mean, that's what shchittas look like. But for him, he became sick. And then, 12 or 13 years later, there was a maid in his house, and she was cleaning up, she was sweeping up. The Gemara says this in Maseches Ksuvas. The Gemara. And there was a little weasel, a weasel. So she took the broom, wanted to kill it or hurt it or get rid of it. And Rebbe said, V'racham aval kol ma'asav. Don't hurt the weasel. So this was, his health was restored. What's my point? Nefesh HaBahamis changes it. Nefesh HaBahamis means it can be very, very bad. You can have a German shepherd, you can have a lion, you can have a cheetah, Nefesh HaBahamis, and they're wild, undomesticated beasts. Like it says, Yetzer Leva Adam Ramin Urav, Ayar, Pera Adam Yivalit. A person is born, as it says, like a wild donkey. But essentially, the Nefesh HaBahamis is not evil. Essentially, the Avodah with the Nefesh HaBahamis is work of education, of enlightenment, of sublimation. It's an avodah. Rabbi Steinsaltz, Rabbi Even Yisrael puts it, he said, it's not a melchemes hashmad, it's an avodah chinuchit. It's not a war of shmad against it, it's work of education. It's pedagogical work with your animal soul. Nobody's going to say the main function of a pedagogue is to destroy the children. Somebody says, what's the main thing of a teacher? Just destroy them all. Silence them and make sure they don't say a word during the year. They're all troublemakers. If the approach is everyone in my classroom wants to make trouble and wants to destroy me, we know what the classroom looks like. Either it's a boot camp, a concentration camp, or it's a war zone. Or usually it's a poor teacher against poor children who completely are not on the same wavelength. It's not a war. It's a relationship. It's a relationship that must be built on trust, and must be built on connection, and must be built on attachment. Are there children who will misbehave? Absolutely. Will there be children who get into a fight? Yeah. Will be the children who are completely not interested in the lesson? Yeah, absolutely. So now I have to figure out how to talk to the children, how to communicate to the children. Should there be consequences? Yeah. Is there discipline? Yeah. But all the discipline is in the context of connection, the context of pedagogy. I want to bring out who you are. Right. So essentially, it's very different than I'm here to fight you, to crush you, to destroy you. That's the so it's a huge shift. The Nefesh HaBahamis can have very, very destructive thoughts. Absolutely. It may want to steal, it may want to kill, it may want to commit crimes. And on a more benign level, it can introduce a lot of darkness into a person. But essentially, and that's the whole point, there is a conversation that needs to happen. The animal has a personality. It's a soul. It has an identity. It has a way of thinking about the world. Its way of thinking may be very limited. Like the Mashal of Rebbe Avram today, my word processor is addicted to one program, and that's all it's doing. That's what keeps on running. In the back end, in the front end, there's no other program. But it has a program. It has a way of thinking. A couple of viruses creeped in. Right? It's very predictable. It's always following the same patterns. It needs it, but the point is, it has a program. That's what we mean.
Sounds like an education for the programmer too.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. When you reprogram a system, right? I'm not going to destroy you. When you do a code review, I'm not trying to destroy you. I want to see, where the errors creeped in.
So putting a lid on a box.
Yeah.
Is doing something, but the goal is to elevate.
Yeah.
I think. So I don't want to derail you, but that was just my question.
Yeah. Now, in that itself, there's two stages, something called iskafia and ishapcha. Those are two important words. Iskafia literally means to subdue, like subjugation or subduing. Ishapcha means transformation. But people make a mistake. They think iskafia means repression. I don't think it means that. Iskafia means not every part of me is ready to be transformed at every moment. It would be nice, but it doesn't work that way. Sometimes, right, I have to listen to the Nefesh HaBahamis and say, you know what? I'm in control. I'm a big boy. You're safe, but we're going to do it this way. You'll be fine. It's like a mother and a father who parent a child with presence. Not with anger, with presence. We're good. We're good. No, it's dangerous. It's dangerous. So I have to listen. I have to know, and I have to say, you know what, maybe we'll get back to this. We'll talk about it later. And this is what we do internally as well. It's called iskafia because we're not falling prey to the explosive emotion of the animal soul, in the sense that I'm going to break your nose or break the windows, right? Because that's what I'm feeling. Or I'm going to run away forever. I may be feeling that way, and that's the little animal is hyperactive, or is very vigilant, or is filled with crazy fear or anxiety or shame or whatever it is. Every person's Nefesh HaBahamis has their its own unique expression. Depends on the hour of the day. Depends how it's triggered. So iskafia would mean, with compassion, to be able to identify it and put it in its place. Put it in its place means understand where it's coming from and understand that this is not exactly the decision I'm going to be following. And it's in simple things. I want to eat a piece of food. The piece of food is not good for me, but I want it. And the Nefesh HaBahamis, in its mindset, said, this is your Mashiach, This piece of cake is your Messiah, right? You eat it and you're happy. I'm not happy 20 minutes later. I'm going to be in a bad mood because it's carbs and sugar. Right? So what do? They say, I don't want it. I do want it. This is where iskafia would come. Iskafia would come in to identify the urge, appreciate that these urges can be very intense but ultimately superficial, and then say, I got this one, okay, and I understand, and we move away from it. Ishapcha is already a level where ultimately the urge is transformed. When a person works on their Nefesh HaBahamis and does this, things get transformed. There's always a skafia on other levels. There's different layers of the onion. So that's a general summation of a lot of the discussion. Yeah. So now we go weiter. We're holding Perek Zayin, page 293. 293 in your copies, the bottom, the last paragraph. Everything we spoke about relates to the avodah, to the work in the levels of nefesh, ruach, and neshama, which when we're talking about nefesh, ruach, and neshama, sheklalu some koiches pnimim shebayim bislapshus. Generally, nefesh, ruach, and neshama are called koiches pnimim. What do we mean by koiches pnimim? Shebayim bislapshus. Koiches pnimim, as I said in the beginning of the class, are koiches, faculties, that are pnimim. They're integrated, and they come bislapshus. Bislapshus means they're enclosed, from the word lavush. They're enclosed and manifested and embodied by whatever is containing them. In our case, the animal soul and the body can contain them, can manifest them. They can become a lavush. The point of a garment is, a garment must be suitable in measurement and size to that which is donning the garment. I have to wear a jacket. If I get a smaller jacket, my body won't be able to go into it. So a lavush always has to be something that's tailor-made, that matches that which is dressed up in it. So when you say something comes bihislapshus, it means the way it relates to its environment is one, that it's a relatable. The environment is suitable to it, so it could manifest it. So nefesh, ruach, and neshama come bihislapshus. What does it mean bihislapshus? Their relationship to the body is one that is integrated in the chemistry of the body. The different parts of the body manifest that aspect of the soul, or at least could manifest that aspect of the soul. By definition, therefore, there is a measurement, there is a limit, because it's a conversation that happens in a relatable way. And that's why it can impact the body and the animal soul in a very personal and in a very pnimiyisdik, I mean in a very real and visceral way, because it's the aspects of the soul that have more of a measurement, they have more of a limit. Hagbala is limit, medida is a measurement. And now we get to yet a deeper state in consciousness, which comes from yet a deeper dimension of the divine soul in holiness. And this is called the koiches of makifim, not koiches pnimim, but koiches makifim. And they go into the last two categories generally of the soul called chaya and yechida. Nefesh, ruach, neshama is koiches pnimim. Chaya yechida, koiches makifim. Just like in garments, right? My shirt has to be a certain size. The same is true with my pants, the same is true with my jacket. Same is true with shoes. You take smaller shoes and it's squeezing your feet, you can't wear it. Or big shoes, again, you can't wear it. But then you have a lavush that's more like a talus. Take a talus. A talus, over there, it's more flexible. Because the talus, I'm not putting a particular limb, a particular ava, like my hand through the talus. The talus is more, that's called a lavush makif. It surrounds the whole body. It covers, it envelops much of the body. And therefore, it could be a much larger size than my jacket, because I don't have to fit into the talus. On the contrary, if the talus is big, it's big. It's still a lavush, it's still a garment. Right? So this is just an example in garments themselves. You have, that's why a talus is often called makif. It's not limited, it's not defined by a particular limb. It's more of an that encompasses the entire body. What is this is all a mashal, of course. We're not talking here about physical garments. The mashal is the difference of koiches pnimim and koiches makif. Koiches pnimim are koiches where I channel them through awareness and through emotion, through embodiment. Koiches makifim are koiches that have an intensity to them which transcends the ability for them to be embodied and manifested in a limited way, because they don't lend themselves to that limitation, because they don't subject themselves to that filtering and limitation, so they remain makif. Makif literally means it surrounds you, right? Like hakafos, lahakif, makif, nikif. When you go around something, it's called your makif. What does it mean spiritually? Not that chayyichid is around you and not inside of you, but the way it is around in you is as though it was hovering above you, meaning it's not inside of you in a way that they say, this is how I feel, this is how I integrate it. It's inside of me and it has tremendous influence on me. And sometimes more influence than any koiches pnimim. Because since I'm not aware of it, so therefore it actually allows itself to have influence in a way that there's no resistance. Koiches pnimim, it has to talk to me, so I have to accept it. Koiches makifim, they can just yield all their influence, positive or negative, kedusha or not kedusha, without any awareness. It doesn't go through all these filters, so it's much more intense. That's called makif. So that's what we're going to see now. We spoke about nefesh, ruach, neshama. There's also chai yichid. And he starts explaining v'yuvan al pi achilik sheben hasaga 294. Yuvan al pi achilik sheben hasaga b'seichel b'chinas neshama linyan ha'akara v're'iyah. Starting off with chaya, we'll understand this based on the difference between what's called hasaga b'seichel, comprehending something with your seichel. Seichel is with your mind, cognitive faculties. That's called neshama, versus hakara ure'iyah, recognizing something in a way of seeing it. Hine inyan hasagu ba'ofen sheyedeyas inyan mitzat seichel v'hasbara. Hasaga, comprehension, intellectual comprehension means you know something. But the reason you know it and the way you know it is because of seichel, because hasbara. Because there's a logical explanation of this truth. And it's not just you're being fed a fact, but it can be proven, it can be explained. That's what seichel is, and that's what hasbara means. Lahasbir, to be masbir, to explain it. V'hainu, so even though I know it, I got it, I understand it, makes perfect sense. Maybe I can prove it, I can show it to you, I can explain to you what it is. That's all true. But v'hainu she'ein ze ba'ofen shu ba'atzma yedeya es hadavar. By definition, it means I myself don't know the thing. Ela shehaseichel masbir u'mechayev shehu kach. My seichel proves it. It proves it. It's a very subtle distinction he's making here. So I do know it. He says you don't know it. Your seichel is telling you that this is how it is. It's almost similar. Somebody tells me a story that he saw. I trust him. He's a good guy. He's not a liar. But I wasn't there. I'm not a witness. You're sharing with me a story. Somebody outside of me is telling me a story, but I never saw it. So, therefore, even if I trust him and I believe, maybe 100 people are telling me the story. It's not like I'm doubting the facts. They're normal people, they're stable people, they're reliable people, I have a relationship with them. But they're bringing me the story. I didn't see the story. So the Rebbe says that's what seichel is. Seichel essentially is you have a good friend, have a good brain, and he's proving to you that it's this and this and this and that. So he's telling you a story. And this is true with every logical conclusion and every logical idea and awareness is the seichel bringing you information about reality. Information about reality may be accurate, but it's not reality. It's the information of reality.
Filling up the gaps. Filling up the gaps.
Filling up the gaps.
Seichel.
Yeah.
So you might have a tremendous gaps, and the way you feel it is your way, and it's not necessarily
Right.
reality.
Yeah. Therefore, and therefore you'll see even when you understand something well with your seichel, somebody who's a greater chacham, somebody who's smarter, or did more research, or lives later and therefore has more tools, or is sharper or deeper, or is more objective, reviews it from a different perspective, could come and ask questions and bring proofs to the opposite. And suddenly, if you're an objective person and you don't have this bias that I have to be right, because you're a real person, you try to be objective and analytical and scientific, you're going to have a doubt in the authenticity of your theory or your idea or your logical conclusions. And if there's enough questions, which every question is a concealment on the story. So it's like you have this friend told you this gewaldige meise, It's amazing, and maybe you changed your whole plans based on the story, and then somebody comes, right, and shows this crack in the story, and this crack in the evidence, and this detail is not true, and this detail. Okay, so you could still live with it. And then when there's enough questions and enough obstacles, you say, you know what, we're throwing it out of the window. And essentially, this is how wisdom evolves throughout history. Newtonian physics was considered so grounded in reality. Greek philosophy and Greek science for thousands of years, Aristotelian science and physics and philosophy, this was the stuff of reality. Mi yavei acharei hamelech, who's going to come? Today, it's close to obsolete. Newtonian, Isaac Newton was a very, very brilliant man. With the tools he had, he developed systems and patterns that were extremely, extremely impressive, and used this true ability to be able to survey and perceive in order to reach conclusions. Came a Yidele by the name of Albert Einstein, and upended so much of it. Einsteinian physics, Newtonian physics, it's a completely different universe. What happened? Because this is the process. The process is I was using my seichel, my tools of intellect, to be able to inform reality. It told me stories, it came to conclusions. Those stories may be extremely compelling and prevalent. That's what seichel does, it tries to bring proof. And then somebody comes, and with new tools, or with new ideas, or with new insights, or with new developments, could upend it all. To the point that you say, you know what? I'm not even going to keep a little bit. Sometimes you still try to hold on to the skeleton. We're going to make changes. You make this change. That's what sometimes happens. In other words, you have to fix the old theory. That's the first level. You see this problem. Then sometimes you say, you know what? This whole thing got to go. It's also true in people's lives, right? We also build up theories of life. In order to function, you have to have a theory of life. We do it instinctively, but there's a pattern. There's the way I have learned to operate with life. Now, there's a crack here, a crack there, crack there, crack there. So I have to fix this, I have to fix this. And then at some point, you say the whole thing got to go. The whole paradigm got to go. That's a very, very revolutionary moment in a person's life. It's not just, people have houses, right? So there's a leak here, so you bring in... there's a leak here, so you bring in the person to fix it, and then there's a leak here, and then this breaks down, that breaks down. Then at some point somebody comes and says, this place needs a gut job, sorry. The whole foundation here. We'll fix. You want to really know what's happening? This thing has no existence. Just giving a mashal. Here we're talking, of course, in Seichel. So 1,000 people told me the story. Maybe 100,000 people told me the story. But with new evidence, as reality unfolds, things happen. To take one example, Taka in science, since Aristotle lived thousands of years ago. He was the tutor of Alexander the Great. Alexander of Moikden from Macedonia, was 100, 200 years before Hanukkah. Hanukkah happened 2,500 years ago. So you're talking about, for thousands of years, the common knowledge by all that followed Aristotle was that what's called the world is a kadmon. The world is a kadmon means, there's always a question, how did it come into existence? How did the universe come into existence? The answer is it was always there. So you don't have that problem. Of course, it contradicted the first pasuk in Chumash, Reishis, bar Elokim, it's a Shemayim v'Saretz, which means the first word is, there's a beginning. Why is that the first word of Torah? First of all, because it's good that the first word of a book should be the beginning, because it's the beginning. But also because it changes everything. If there's a beginning, right, you have to know why was there a beginning. That means there was a transformative change between pre-beginning and beginning. Especially when we know the beginning was also the beginning of time. So it's not just a little change. It's a qualitative quantum leap from a reality that transcends time to a reality that exists with time. Zman is also a nivra. Zman is also created. I think the Vilna Gaon says, Bereishis bara Elokim, Elokim created the concept of beginning. Reishis is also created. You understand? We learn Reishis, Bar Elokim is a Shemayim V'Saretz. The Reishis is also Bar Elokim. So that's how powerful the leap is. Suddenly in the 1920s, which was not very long ago, it's our parents' generation, or grandparents' generation, depends how old you are. There's a whole new theory that completely upended thousands of years of philosophy. And it was till the 1960s, in the 1960s, when scientists can detect a sound that they had no explanation for, which at least for most of them confirmed that theory which was proposed in the 1920s about the Big Bang. Now, without getting into the details of what the Big Bang is, but the revolution is, there's a Reishis, there's a beginning. There's a moment of transformation from ayin to yesh. However you want to define the details, and suddenly a philosophy of thousands of years was discarded. So this is just one example. There comes a point where you may be chaylik, you may dismiss the entire inyan. But there's a deeper type of relationship with something. It may begin with comprehension, it may begin with information, but then the person immerses himself in it, bedas chazak. Das chazak means das and powerful das, intense das. To the point where from seichel it becomes what's called a hakara. Hakara means recognition. But what do we mean by recognition? Similar to the metaphor, nobody is telling me the story anymore. This story I know from myself. And this story I know from myself, 1,000 people could come and show me 1,000 different cracks in the story. Thank you. You may have a good question. But as long as I believe that I'm sane and I'm not having optical illusions, okay. You may need somebody to... right, there was the person who was institutionalized, and finally after a few months, the doctor said, you can go. So he says, can you give me he says, why? He says, you're fine, you're ka'echad adam, you're normal, everything is good. So he said, could you give me a note? Could you give me a note that I'm a normal person? He says, absolutely, with your signature, yeah. So this world-renowned doctor makes a note and says, Chaim Yankel, Finkelstein, Ben Meir Zelig, Ben Shloime, Ben Meir, Ben Motel, Ben Moshe David is a normal person. HaChosim, a sign of this great world-renowned doctor, Nobel Prize recipient. Okay? This fellow, Chaim Yankel, comes to shul the next day. He goes over to the Rav, and he says, Rebbe, bist du ein normaler Mensch? Rebbe, are you normal? He says, I try to be. I hope so. He says, prove it! Prove it! How should I prove it? He says, I could prove it! I could prove it. I have a piece of paper. I'm much more normal than you. I have a star. You have a milva al peh. I have a milva b'shtar, right? Your loan is bal peh. You say you're normal. Your wife probably disagrees. Just my herself. You say you're normal. Your shviger for sure disagrees. I have a document that I'm normal. So you understand so he sent him back to the doctor. He said, very good. But you understand my point. A document is very important. A deed. Seichel is like it's a star, it's a document. I have proof. Hakara means visceral knowledge. Now, of course, if somebody chas v'shalom is experiencing mental illness, we have to always be careful with this, right? My eyes could be deceptive. He's giving a mashal that I hear the story, that I see the story. And what if I can't see? And what if I have hallucinations? And what if I see things that don't exist? So we always have to always be sensitive to that. But it's trying to bring out a point in terms, it's all a mashal. It's trying to bring out the point. It's a different type of, it's experiential knowledge. That's what das means. It's yours. You own it. It's yours. And now somebody could come and ask a lot of questions. It's not going to change. Not because I'm stubborn. If you're stubborn, then it doesn't have to do with what we're taught. That's not das. That's the Nefesh Bahamas afraid of being disproven. Stubbornness is one of the greatest forms of survival with insecurity. I am so stuck that I have to be stubborn. Ezo chacham haloimed mikol adam. The power of the Chacham, when you learn Gemara, one of the most impressive things, even to a beginner's, is the intellectual integrity. There's no bias. There's no biases. There's a Mishnah in Adi, I think the Mishnah in Adius. There was a huge machloikus between Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, other Tanoim, about a mikveh, how you build a mikveh, and what pasels a mikveh, and how many lugemayim, mayim shuv, and a very fundamental machloikus about governs daily Jewish life about a mikveh. And then the Gemara says that there was a weaver, a gardem echad, mishar hashpasais. They don't even know his name. He worked in the gate of dung, shar hashpatot. That's how he's identified. A weaver worked in the gate of dung. And he said, I'll tell you what I heard from Shmaya and Naftalian. He testified, and that became the halacha. So you have Beis Shammai, you have Beis Hillel, you have other Tanaim, and then you have this fellow, they don't even know a name, right? He worked with Ashpaz, and he became the authority. Because there's no such a thing, elitism, you come from this mishpacha, we're going to listen to you. The integrity is critical, intellectual integrity. But here itself, you have two levels. So we're not talking about a stubborn person, we're talking about an open person. But once there's an inyan of das and akar, it's recognition, not because I need to win you, and not because I'm arrogant, not because I can agree. It's a completely different experience. Because I know it with every fiber of my being. And you know something with every fiber of your being, it's a different relationship. I saw this story, I didn't hear this story. Hadugmala is an example for this. Is k'fi shiroyim sha'atinik yidei alikris abba oid lufnei shenasa bal seichel. The Gemara says a child, and we see a child could say Abba or Ima, right? Tate, father, tati, mami, mama, even before the child becomes a Bal Seichel, meaning has a developed brain of how to understand what a father is, what a mother is, why are you my father, what's the relationship between me and you, how did that happen? He may not know that. He's not on that level. But still, this is my father, this is my mother. That recognition, you could say it's just a baby recognition. But there's something very deep about it. This is a type of hakara. It's certain by him. And questions of seichel won't undermine it. You'll say, yeah, but I don't know, you'll ask some question. It won't undermine it because it's not hakarim, it's hatseichel, because somebody sat with the child and proved to him that just like 2 + 2 is 4, so this is your mother. This is just an example. A child, that's the only way he could recognize things. And that's why what children recognize becomes so deeply ingrained, because it's not filtered through the logical construct. If you make a comment to me today about myself, right, my brain is going to take over and is going to say, does it make sense? Does it not make sense? Why does it make sense? The child doesn't have that tool to discriminate, to dissect, to distinguish. So it can go in very, very deep, both in the positive and also the opposite. I don't have that filter of seichel to say, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. This guy has his own problems, right? The child doesn't have that filter. But here we're talking in the positive sense. The recognition of father and mother is a recognition, not mitzad a seichel-dik idea. This is what a father is. This is what a mother is. This is how biology works. So I have proof you're my father and mother. It's the part of the brain that has a koyach hakara. So he says, it's not just a child, it's just a dugma. You can have a gadol b'seichel. Somebody who's very, very developed intellectually. Even though he's using a seichel, and he may have reached it through comprehension with seichel, But through going into a deeper place, you reach a hakara that you know yourself it's there. You have a hakara. So it's not like the seichel told me a story and brought me proof about something else, but that reality itself is so vivid. And from this hakara, you reach even a higher place. The recognition is so deep that the eye, we call the third eye, the Eina Seichel, the eye of the mind, can see it as though you saw something with your physical eye. And then you cannot contradict the authenticity of it through questions, through contradictions, which all come from Seichel. Because you yourself perceive it as is. When you see it that way, and then when you see it the way it is, so then when you have a position, when you have something concealing it, it's a whole different type of relationship. You don't at all get deterred from the concealment because you know exactly what it is. You know that this is a blockage. It's not like a question. It doesn't undermine the visceral awareness and clarity. It's obvious. This is a blockage. This is a problem. So it's a whole different relationship. And he says a person has the ability to work it through, either to nullify it or, if possible, to elevate it. This is the avodah that has to do not with bina but with chachma. And in the levels of the soul, we call it not nefesh, not ruach, not neshama, we call it chaya, the fourth name. This is known as the vision of chachma, the seeing, the ability to see in the third eye, which we call chachma, the mind's eye. I as in E-Y-E and I as in I. That I. Shahabitl shenasa al yadahu bitl atzmi. And the bitl it creates is called a bitl atzmi. What do we mean a bitl atzmi? Hainu she'ein ze bitl sheba michutze menu. It's not a bitl that comes from outside. Shezel bitl hayeshabai. They have one of us saga shaseichel mevin davar shemichutze menu. Elazel bitl atzmi bitl b'metzias. There's something called bitl hayesh, which comes through understanding, like Seichel understands something outside of me. So the bittul is also something outside of me. And then there's a bittul atzmi. Bittul atzmi means a bittul from within. From the atzmius means from the essence of the person. This is called bittul b'metzias, meaning the entire metzias of the person, the entire reality and identity of the person is transformed or elevated or aligned through this bittul. So this bittul ayesh, bittul b'metzias, and that's the difference between neshama and chaya. And the example he was giving is from understanding something through the tools of understanding, which is basically like somebody telling me a story that happened somewhere else. So the seichel is telling me that it's so, but it's not a, so to speak, a direct relationship. And then there's a hakara, which is a direct relationship that may start with seichel, but it goes to a much deeper place till a point where it can even be like seeing. Seeing is believing, where nothing can contradict it. Yeah. If you're going to your chuppah, right, and you have your father on one side, your mother on another side, or whatever the custom is, two fathers, two mothers from both sides. And you turn to your mother on the way to the chuppah, you turn to your father and say, 1 second, why are you taking me to the chuppah? You say, well, I'm your mother, I'm your father. Can you prove it? Can you prove it? It's like that guy, do we have a document to prove that you're my father or mother? It usually doesn't happen, right? What if the child says, I want proof? I want proof you're my father or mother. So what do? They say, okay, let's put the chuppah on pause. We could prove it. Today you could prove it, right? You go, you test DNA. You look at the match, say, oh! And we come back with a certificate. I can prove that I'm your father. technically you proved it, right? But you understand that there's something very, very sad about this whole story. What's sad about this whole story is that we had to prove it. You proved it. You proved it very well. In fact, you know that your father is your father much better than I know, because I don't have proof. I don't have proof. We may not even look alike, so I don't even have the external proof. But it's a very sad story.
Doesn't it more say that we believe the mother but not the father?
Yeah. That's all. But what happens the opposite? What happens a child who was adopted? A child who was orphaned and taken in by the community, and in the olden days it happened a lot, or a child who was adopted by someone else. And they grow up, they know their entire life that this is not their biological father and mother. And they're looking for their biological father and mother. Suddenly here, the test of DNA is the best thing that happened to this child. Because it's my only way of having a relationship. A woman comes to me one day and says, I'm your mother. A father comes, I'm your real father. Thank you. You know, in China, there's a lot of child trafficking. So, you know, they kidnap kids as babies and bring them to families that don't have children. There's an estimate number that between 25,000 and 200,000 children a year are abducted in China and sold. It's horrific numbers. So not long ago, there was a story, Maamar, not long ago, a father, 24 years he's looking for his son. His son was taken away when he was a little kid. He was playing in the garden in front of the house. He was taken away. 24 years, this man was searching for his son. He recently found him. He traveled the whole China on a motorcycle, a bicycle. He had 10 different bicycles. He was wounded. He was hospitalized. 24 years searching for a kid. And he found him. But how did they prove it? DNA. So here, DNA, oh, that's insulting. No, that's the whole proof. That's the only way I could build a relationship. You understand the difference? If I grew up with my father and mother and say the way to the chuppah, prove it. Prove that you're my father, prove you're my mother. Let's do a DNA test before the chuppah. Oy va'avoy, what happened in that house? You say, no, I need to be intellectual. I need to be logical. If you're taking me down the chuppah, I want to know that you're my father. Okay, I mean, you understand? But if we never had a connection, that proof is the most important proof. So this is the distinction. So the Rebbe says that's what all seichel is like. All seichel is like going and finding a certificate of DNA to prove that you're my father. It's proof, it's good proof. But everybody understands. Somebody will say, oh, the doctor confused two DNAs. He's not your father. Okay, he's not my father. Yesterday he was, today he's not. That's not how a child knows a father and mother. The hakara of a child doesn't have to do with proof. This was the year, and people got married, and a child was not born in a vacuum. And yeah, there's proof also. We could prove it, but it doesn't add. If somebody will come to you today and say, I'll prove to you that this is your mother. Oh, now, mommy, now I know you're my mother. Now I know. The Rebbe was once talking about emunah. So he says, how do you define emunah? He says, emunah is a zach, was a kashe, macht es nicht schwacher, und a teretz macht es nicht starker. Emunah is something that a question won't weaken it, and the answer won't strengthen it. When we use the word emunah, we often see it as a weakness. It's blind faith. I believe, my grandmother said, so I believe, my mother said, I believe. They told me in yeshivas, I believe. Emunah is a form of not thinking. That's not what emunah is. That's not what real emunah is. I mean, I know there's that type of emunah. We have Muslim cousins who grow up indoctrinated with certain truths, and they believe it very strongly. They're ready to die for it. Allah Akbar. How serious can you take that emunah? If emunah is based on shutting down your brain, closing your eyes, they call it blind faith. I'm not ready for blind faith. By definition, it's blind. In other words, if you open your eyes, you'll see that it's all a game. So the only way I can teach it to you is by telling you, be blind, even if I don't use those words. So Maamar, Mishpatim, the Rebbe said that's emunah means it's something that a question won't make it weaker. And an answer won't make it stronger. Why not? Of course it'll make it weaker. People always email me, I have questions on emunah. Could you answer me? Because if you answer me, I'll get it back. It's an important conversation, but that's not the question of emunah. That's an intellectual conversation. It's a different realm. That's the realm of seichel. And it's an important realm. Right? Prove, could you show me the DNA? And whenever you prove it through DNA, there can also be the doctor can make a mistake. Maybe they took the results of someone else and they confused it with this child. It can happen. Huh? And that's the idea of seichel, and that's how it's supposed to work. You prove something and I'll ask a question. And then I'll ask another question, and then you'll answer and I'll ask another question. And maybe my questions will be better than my answers. Right? Sometimes in Gemara you have a whole shackle of ataya, and by the end the Gemara says, Tiyufta, checkmate, this opinion is dismissed. Tiyufta, it's refuted, or at least kasha, which means we're left with a kasha. Or sometimes the Gemara will say, Hadri Rabashi B'dusi, whatever was said was actually a lie. It's completely not tenable. You can't embrace it. That's the world of seichel. The world of re'iyah, of chachma, it's a different world. You want to give me the DNA and prove she's my mother? Fine, gesundheit. I mean, it's not going to make me more she's not going to become more your mother. Now, sometimes you have to stay in the world of seichel. If you're dealing with scientific theories and you say, I just see it, and you become addicted to it because you're winning the Nobel Prize or because you have a tenure in Harvard University, then it's a disaster. Science, by definition, should always be called a theory. What do I mean, a theory? A theory means based on the tools that we have today and the instruments that we possess today, which are incredible, this is how we understand reality. But the humility that in 50 years from now, everything may be changed. Maybe not, maybe yeah. That openness to speak as a scientist about absolute truth is really crossing a border that turns me into a religious personality and not a scientist. The koyach real emunah doesn't mean it's blind, I don't want to think, I'm intellectually lazy. There's emunah lamata min haseichel, there's emunah lamayla min haseichel. Emunah lamayla min haseichel means it's the ability of the soul to perceive reality. Just like you see something. It's like a sixth sense of the soul that when cultivated, it allows you to absorb ultimate reality. That's called re'iyah. That's called hakara. Rabbi Hillel Parcha, one of his Maamarim, brings an example in Halach and Elam Metzias. There's a difference between simonim and tviyas ayin. If something is lost, how do I retrieve it? So we have the halacha of have a simon, right? And you found it. So I come and I tell you the simonim, whatever the simonim are. There was this type of knot, it was this type of color, it was found in this particular area. As many identifying simonim I give, and then if it's authenticated, you give it back to me. That's the mitzvah. And then there's something called tviyas ayin. Tviyas ayin, the Gemara says, Tzurva Mirabanan, a Talmud Chacham who's known as a very, very honest, scrupulous person who will never take something that may not be his. Even if there's no simon, he has a tviyas ayin. My talus looks like everybody else's talus. I don't have a simon. My coat looks like another 100 coats in shul. But I have a tviyas ayin. What's the difference of simonim and tviyas ayin? Simonim it's an identifying mark that proves that it's mine. Tviyas ayin is a mashal and Allah. What's your identifying mark? We have a relationship. When you wear something for a while, you have a relationship. It's a mashal and halacha for this difference. Tviyas ayin means it's mine. Prove it. Prove it. You have the DNA of the coat. Prove it. A simon is proof. Huh? So that's what he says, yeah. So even as an adult, there's the level of what we call seichel, and which is very important, because that's the beginning of contact. And if I didn't grow up with my father and mother, if I'm adopted, that's the only thing I have. The only thing I have seichel. There was the Zidichayver, Sar Bais Hazeb, Tzviyash of Zidichayv. So he has a very critical essay on the Alter Rebbe, on the Balatanya, for using Chachma bin Adas. He said, Anaya Maisa, since when do Jews use seichel? He's upset at the Rambam. He's upset that anyone. He says that's how we became Jews. We became Jews from Yetzias Mitzrayim, from Kriyas Yamsuf, from Matan Torah. Stop with all the philosophy. Philosophy is good for the Greeks. He's very upset at all the Shara Yichud Ve'emunah, all the Svarim that deal with Achdus Hashem, the Chovos HaLevavos. That's what he writes. So the Bnei Yisachar has a commentary. It's a sefer called, I think, Sur Meirava Sei Tov. So as a commentary, he said, it's all very nice for him. He said, if somebody was by Yetzias Mitzrayim and Kriyas Yamsuf and Matan Torah, you're right. But this is for people who weren't there. Sometimes this is the way you give them access to it. What is he trying to say? He's trying to say, if you were by Yetzias Mitzrayim and Kriyas Yamsuf and Matan Torah, so now you're looking for DNA, your mother looks at you and says, I raised you, I gave birth to you. I was up with you night after night after night. When you were in the hospital for 3 months, I sat by your bed 24/7. I nurtured you 24/7. Now you're going to go get me DNA? And if we get DNA, that's what's going to create the relationship. But if you never had a mother, if you're an orphan, if you're adopted, so what should you do? Say, okay, forget it. I close my mind. Now, yeah, I need DNA. I need proof, yeah. I need ADIS. I need people to say, oh, I remember 39 years ago, this woman had a connection to you. That's what I have, ADIS. I need simonim. That's called simonim. I don't have tviyas ayin. I can't look at this person and know with every fiber, this is my mother, this is my father. This is already something called das chazak. Va'adam yada es chava. Adam nu chava means there was intimacy, it's connection. We're talking here intellectually, it's a different type of relationship. Emunah means the soul sees, not the soul hears, not the soul understands. The soul sees. Are there questions? You may give me 1,000,000 proofs that my mother is not my mother. Fine, I hear you. I don't have an answer. You know what? I don't need an answer. And I'm not afraid of questions. Real emunah is not afraid of questions. People think if you have emunah, you have to be blind. No, that's already a cult. In a cult, you're afraid of questions because questions will undermine everything. I once had, unfortunately, a friend. He fell into a cult. Sure enough, in Olam HaEmes. It was a real churban. So I would talk to him. And he once told me he can't talk to me anymore. I said, why? He says, the cult leader told him, it was a cult in Philadelphia, that he shouldn't talk to me anymore. I said, why? He said, because he said that you won't understand, and you're not interested in the truth. And therefore, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. I said, maybe he doesn't want me to talk to you because I may ask you a good question. He says, no, can't be. If I'm afraid of my position, I don't want you to talk to certain people. I don't even want you to talk to yourself. Because if you talk to yourself, you may ask good questions. Real emunah is confident. It's not lamata min hasech, it's lamayla min hasech. Shtus de kedusha is lamayla min hasech. You use seichel, adarabah. If you need it, gesundheit. You want to go to the DNA path, it's very interesting and it's fascinating. But it's not what's going to nourish the soul. The nourishment of the soul is the iyah shebechachma. It's the seeing, it's the visceral knowledge, it's the relationship itself. When you prove Hashem's existence through seichel, you don't have the divine experience. You have proof that people, your seichel said, I have a good story for you. But I don't have direct connection with that story. The connection with that story, that requires a different skill in the soul. It's a different, the soul has it, but it's a different, this is called chaya shebenashama. And that's why it's a koyach makif. Koyach makif means it's more transcendent. It's not filtered through the limited structure of logic, which by definition is all about structure. And because it's about structure, it can't be Teufus infinity. It could be Teufus mathematics. It can discuss the mathematics of infinity, but not infinity. I mean real infinity. I don't mean infinity in terms of numbers. So the bittul of chachma, of re'iyah, of chaya is a bittul atzmi, not bittul ayesh. Bittul ayesh is like the bittul that other people tell me the story. It has a very deep impact if you tell me the story. And if you prove it through DNA, it's a very powerful thing. But it's not me. It's your story that I trust. The bittul atzmi is the bittul that permeates your entire metzius because it comes completely from within. Once you see something on that level, now when there's an obstacle, it's a whole different relationship. You're not competing with something that can cast a doubt. Now, this is a very sensitive idea because if you jump ahead, right, a person could just say, I see it, I see it, I see it. In other words, this can also come from a place of blindness. There's nobody to talk to. So that's why he says, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama is important. And then from Neshama, a person can reach a level of Chaya, which is another fuse in the soul. It's a capacity of the soul. And then he says, Amnam. Gamma bittul shemitzad hachachma b'chinas chayu b'ofen sheyesh metzias shel menaged shetzrichim levatlo levarera. Even the bittul of chachma, which is chaya, is something that there's a metzias of an opposition, and you have to be at mevatel, and you have to be at mevarer. Either nullify it or elevate it. Varei zal derech hamavur b'imrei binah sheyesh b'chinas ha'ayin shenimshech levatlo lesayesh. Explained in a Sefer Imrei Binah, that's from the Mittler Rebbe, the son of the Balatanya. When you speak about ayin, there's an ayin that is communicated to be mevatel the yesh. V'hainu sha'ayin mis'asik levatel inyan shemechutz meno. The ayin is immersed to nullify something outside of it. Shemizeh gufa muchach shayesh koidem loy. This means that the yesh precedes it, and that's why the ayin needs to be at mevatel, because it has to reckon with it. And it has some erech, some value, some significance relative to the ayin. So the ayin is mevatel the yesh, but the definition of the ayin is that it's combating and disproving the yesh. Deeper yet is the avodah which we call yechidish benefesh. Shechavuka udvuka bach. In the Hashainis of Sukkot, in the Nusach of the Balatanya, is the third day of Sukkot, but everybody says it in the Hashainis. We speak about the soul, and we say, Chavuka udvuka bach. Chavuka comes from the word chibuk, to chabkeni. It embraces, udvuka, it's connected, it's bedvekus, it cleaves, and it's one bach with you. Toyenes ulach, it carries your oil, your yoke, it carries you. Yechide leyachdach. It's called Yechide from the word Yachid, right? Yachid chei ha'olam melech. Yechide, it's oneness from the word Yachid, singularity. Leyachdach, to make you one. He says, this is Yechide. What does this mean? U'mitzad b'china zu ein melechatchila metzias acheret shetzrichem levatla. And mitzad this dimension, there's lechatchila no other metzias that you have to be mevatel. Because in Yechida, there's no reality outside of Atzmus Amos Ein Sof. That's the frequency of Yechida, beyond frequencies. It's the Etzem Mamish. So over there's nothing even to be Mavatal. Yeah. It says Yom, in the Torah, the Rebbe says that Yom Kippur is Yom Shenes Chayev by Chamesh Tfilas. It's a day that's Mechuyev in Chamesh Tfilas. So the 5 Tfilas, generally, every day we have 3 tefillas. Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv. It was connected to Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama. Days that there was a carbon, like Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, Yom Tif, we add a 4th tefillah. We call it Musaf. That's the Pchina of Chaya. Only in Kippur is the Chamesh tefillas, the 5th tefillah, which is Ne'ilah. That's Keneged Yechida. That's the level of Yechida. Yeah. Yeah. Musaf is Chaya. That's the extra. It's Makif. So Musaf is such an elevated tefillah. And then you have Ne'ilah, that's Yechida. Why is Ne'ilah called Ne'ilah? So the Gemara says Ne'ilah, it's because Ne'ilah means closing, right? Like Nal. Nal is a lock. Lin'ola tadelet, it's to lock it up. So we say in the time of Ne'ilah of Shari Shamayim, the gates of heaven are about to close because the sun is setting on Yom Kippur. So the gates are coming down. So it's like the feeling is, chaparan, throw in your last petitions. You could still vote. Vote for a good year. Vote for the right year. But chaparan, because the gates are coming down. That's how we teach Ne'ilah. The Rebbe once said in a Sicha, so look at the Sichas in volume 4, we learned it once about Yom Kippur, he says there's a deeper teich in Ne'ilah. During the time of Ne'ilah, the gates of heaven came down already, but you're inside. You're inside. That's Ne'ilah. The gates of heaven are closed, but you're not on this side of it, you're on the other side of it. That's the pchin of Yechida. And that's the distinction he's making between Chaya and Yechida. Chaya is much deeper than the Shama. It's not the relationship of Seichel. It's a relationship like when you see something. It's visceral, it's intimate, it's direct. No question can challenge it, and no answer will make it stronger. You're not in that realm. Again, not because you're stupid and cultish and blind and illiterate and you're lazy. We're not talking about that. That's a different league. We're talking here about something that's beyond sophistication. It's not afraid of sophistication, it's beyond sophistication. And the pshittas, the Baal Shem Tov said, the pshittas von Aish Pashit is pshittas ha'atzmos. The simplicity of a simple Jew, that simple emunah is rooted in that emunah of re'i, of seeing. So he gives a dugma of the Imrei Binid is the ayin she'nimshach levatel hayesh. In other words, you have the ayin that's still competing with the yesh. But the ayin is so real that it's mevatel the yesh. Yesh means somethingness. Ayin is no thingness. And no thingness prevails over somethingness. What does that mean in a person's life? Yesh is when I'm in a mode of somethingness. So I'm always looking for survival. Because it's something that I have to hold on to. Ayin, I'm in a place of no thingness, which is Ein Sof. It's not a thing. So it's the source of everything. If you're a thing, you can't be the source of everything, because you're a thing. If you're no thing or nothing, you're the source of everything. That's what ayin is. So there's a state of ayin where I'm competing with the yesh. That means there's a conception of yesh deep inside that the ayin has to combat, and they have some connection and some relationship. And when you see the reality, it's a different type of dealing with the obstacle. The obstacle doesn't occupy that significant space because you're completely in a different realm. Like, I saw the story, I was there. You want to argue with me? You can argue with me. If you know you were in Australia last night, yeah, and then somebody proves to you with passports that you weren't in Australia, because you could only have one passport, and the passport doesn't have a stamp from Australia, you can't get through customs. You're not Superman, you're not Harry Potter. So how did you get into Australia? The Charaya, you were in New York. Gewaltige questions. So somebody who's trying, if I'm the FBI and have to investigate, that's going to be the evidence. The evidence is going to be from the passport, right? But if you were there, you could take your questions and ask them. But I know where I was. Unless I'm a certified Meshugana, fine, it's something else. Then I can't trust myself. So that's the power of Re'iyah. It's a whole different recognition. It's a different recognition. There's something called Spitzenfingergefühl, intuition, a sixth sense. Sometimes you see things.
But I thought this was visceral. Intuition is something different.
Yeah, I'm just giving different examples.
This is a knowledge, not something.
Yeah, it becomes a knowledge. It becomes a knowledge, and that's what real das is. And deeper then is Re'iyah of Chachma, which is even deeper.
So how does intuition play into it? Does it lead one to the...
Yeah, sometimes intuition opens us up to look again. Sometimes our intuitions are very, very on target, I know somebody who was, for years he was working with somebody, and but there was always a voice in him that said, this is not a good partnership. It's really not a good partner. But it made sense on paper. It made sense on paper. And just one day he followed his intuition and he detached. And it was a little, rationally didn't make sense. Later, he found out that his intuition knew all along that this was a horrible, horrible relationship. There was something very, very, very toxic and unhealthy. And things that were really undermining him. But there was no proof. But his body knew it. But the intuition began a journey. So there is a level of seeing things, and that's what he calls re'iyah, and that ayin, that connection, that's a bittul atzmi. It's not from someone else telling me. It's completely from within. But over there he says there's still something you have to be mevatel. So nefesh, ruach, and neshama, you're dealing with the nefesh habahamis on its own terms. Chaya is already a kayach makif of the neshama. So many ways you can talk to the nefesh habahamis in a way where, come back with a different script. Like, it's so obvious what the nefesh halakis is, what the soul is. Come back with a different script. And the way you deal with it is, there's a certain clarity and a confidence that is completely not confusing. Nefesh, ruach, neshama, you can get confused because you're talking one brain to another brain. In Chaya, there's a clarity of the nefesh halakis that's indisputable, and therefore it's very identifiable. Are you an obstacle? Are you not an obstacle? What I need to do to help you, what you need to do to help yourself. You could still have compassion, but there's a clarity that's indisputable. You don't get entangled in the struggle. That's Chaya. Yechida, there's bichlal no struggle. In Yechida, there's no menaged. Yechida, there's no opposition. Why? Because Yechida is the inyan of chavukut vukabach. There's no other metzias that you have to be mavatal, because there's no metzias outside of Atzmus Ein Sof. Now, I can't just jump to that. There are moments when Yechidah Shebenefesh gets revealed. There are such moments. When that moment happens, Yechidah Shebenefesh gets revealed. What's revealed? What's revealed is all of reality is experienced, so to speak, from Atzmus Ein Sof. And Atzmus Ein Sof is all-inclusive. It includes the Nefesh HaBahamis too, so there's no opposition. You say, yeah, but I had trauma and I'm insecure. I know. Yechidah doesn't deny facts. And I feel so much fear. I know. And I feel so much guilt. I know. And I feel so much shame. I know. Yechidah doesn't argue with facts. But Yechidah suddenly lifts up the Nefesh HaBahamis to Atzmos. And in Atzmos, everything is Einaid Milvada. So I'm not competing, I'm not contending, there's no war, there's no battle, there's no negotiation. There's not even a clarity what you have to do, what you don't have to do. There's lechatchila, no other mitzias outside of Ein Sof. That's the frequency of Yechidah Shebenefesh. It's the frequency of Atzmos. It's not frequencies anymore, because it's not light, it's the essence itself. In this space, everything is one. All my experiences in life were just infinite consciousness having a finite experience. So it was infinite consciousness. You never stepped away. Your Nefesh HaBahamis was never separated. You hear what he's saying?
So the Chaim is...
There's no mitzias that you have to be mevatel. You don't say, let's talk about bittel. Bittel means, something has to become bottle. Something has to get nullified. What is it? My ego. My ego needs to bittel. There's bittel ayesh, there's bittel b'mitzias. There's bittul that's proven to me, that's bittul that's visceral, but it's bittul. The word bittul already means to nullify, to subsume, to align, to connect. Yechidah means you're in the place of Yachid. There's no other metzias to be mevatel. It's like pre-creation. Pre-creation, you need bittul. There's no bittul. Bittul is an insult to Yechidah. Stop talking to me about bittul. We don't have to talk about bittul.
That ego, does it exist on both levels of Nefesh HaBahamis and Nefesh?
Yeah, different level, but yeah.
So Chaya looks like there is a French word for it, which is was transported to English. Clairvoyance.
Which word?
Clairvoyant. Clairvoyance. Clairvoyant from French word to see.
Clairvoyant.
Clairvoyant.
Re'iyah, to see.
Yeah, so it's clear vision beyond physical.
Right.
presence, beyond
Clear vision, yeah. Like we say, the third eye, the mind's eye, that clarity, yeah. And that's what real Amunah is.
So
But it's vision, yeah.
The Yechida is already, this is it. So
This is it.
There's no vision, it's
Yeah.
past that.
Yeah.
It's,
Yechida is above the vision. Chaya, I'm perceiving, but the perception is so crystal clear, there's nothing that's going to undermine it. So you'll ask questions. The questions are good. I may have answers, I may not have answers. Let me ask you a question. You think Jews had answers to the pain of the world? Moshe Rabbeinu said, Lama reyoyse lamaza. Yeah. Why didn't they ever say, you know what? Okay, so there's no God. Look at the atrocities. Look at the suffering. These are good questions. I know they're good questions. First of all, because I know they're good questions, and because I see who asked them. Moshe Rabbeinu was also a big Maimin. He was the Maimin. Avram Avinu. They asked these questions. Yirmiyah Navi, Iyov, David HaMelech. They all asked these questions. But they never said afterwards, okay, so now, based on all these questions, we're going to change the philosophy, and probably this world is just a random mutation, and it's a mistake. And he said, no, I'll prove to you from the atom that there was a and it becomes a philosophical issue. The questions were very real questions, but they knew the questions live in the world of seichel, and they have to be respected as that. And that's why to give stupid answers, people think that to have emunah you have to give stupid answers. No. It's insulting people's intelligence. It's insulting people's emunah. Don't give me stupid answers to strengthen my emunah. You know why? Because if my entire emunah is based on those stupid answers, oy va'avoy. And that's what you see constantly. You're talking about two realms. You're talking about two leagues. In the world of seichel, you're asking very good questions. And in fact, my brain cannot wrap itself around certain things. But my brain doesn't have to wrap itself around reality. And therefore the pain is going to be there. And I don't have to delegitimize the question. I don't have to make believe you're a fool for asking good questions. It's like part of what we spoke yesterday, when you have to start shutting down parts of yourself, it comes back to haunt you. Nefesh Ruach Neshama speaks to the Nefesh Abahamis in its language. Chaya has a clarity of vision that is so visceral, but the questions will not undermine it, but yet it won't undermine the question. It doesn't have to. Emunah is that the question doesn't make it weaker, the answer doesn't make it stronger, so you can appreciate the fact that the brain doesn't have access to this level of reality. I am fine. I understand Ein Sof is Ein Sof, and my structured logic does not get it. If I would have been God, yeah. like Rabbi Yosef Olboy writes, right? Ilu Yadaita ve'Yisib. If I would know him, I would be him. Sometimes I tell myself, thank God I'm not God like that. Thank God, it's hard. It's very hard. At least, I guess if you're that, I don't know, I'm not gonna, but sometimes we feel this pressure that we have to be God. You know what I mean? Having to understand the world is a position that only God needs to do. I don't have such an achrayus. It's not one of the Taryag mitzvahs. I have a mitzvah to put on tefillin, I have a mitzvah to give tzedakah.
But Sadiq said somebody who's not interested to understand the world is not the religion.
Yeah, true. And the Rambam says that the way to Ava and Yira is to understand the world. Right? But the pressure to understand every mystery and every injustice, it's titanic, it's beyond. And that pressure can itself drive you crazy. So there's a simplicity in Amunah that can experience reality without the need to delegitimize questions, and with knowledge that there are questions that are beyond comprehension. And yet it doesn't take away from the reality of Amunah. That's all in Chaya. Then you have Yechida. Yechida is a completely different league. Yechida is the part of the soul that's rooted in the essence of Ein Sof, just like before creation. So there's no other mitzvahs to be mevatel b'chlal. That's not arguing with the Nefesh Habahamis. It's not convincing the Nefesh Habahamis. It's not persuading the Nefesh Habahamis. It's not entangled. It's not even being mevatel anything. It's all oneness. There's nothing outside of Ein Sof. It's the way the world experiences reality, the way it is subsumed in complete oneness, like the ray of a sun in the solar core. The mashal of the ray of the sun in the solar core. We have the ray of the sun, but it's completely subsumed in Ein Sof. So it's all a manifestation of Ein Sof. So it doesn't deny anything that happened to me in my life. But in the level of Yechida, it's all Ein Sof mamash. He says, Ein shum metzias klal melvat atzmus amus. So there's no metzias to be mevat. So there's not anymore two souls that are struggling with each other, or convincing each other, or overwhelming each other, or killing each other, or transforming each other, even transforming each other. I'm not in the field of transformation.
Is Yechida only between the human and Kadosh Baruch Hu, or could be on the level of two people that can experience Yechida?
In real Yechida also translates in relationships between people. Real Yechida doesn't need to be mevatel, doesn't have to nullify anything. So it's experience, if I could use the word experience because I don't have a better word, could be in relationships as well.
So father to son, friend to
Father to son, and husband to wife, and friend to friend, and person to person. On the contrary, the ultimate relationship is Yechida. I'm not just relating to you. So in Yechida you have to understand, it's not just my defenses are down. My defenses being down in a relationship is already one of the biggest and hardest things. Right? Defenses to be down, which means complete trust. Like the trust that a baby has. David HaMelech compares himself, he says, Nafshi kegamul alei imoi. David HaMelech felt like a little suckling in the arms of its mother. You know, you ever look like a little baby, an infant, 3 weeks old, 3 months old. It's cute, it's delicious, it's angelic. And it's being soothed by the mother, just finished eating, right? The mother's waiting for it to give out the burp so she can go to sleep and they can both go to sleep. You know, and the safety in the eyes of that child. You know what I'm talking about? There's a serenity. Unfortunately, we live in a generation today where there's a lot of pressure on mothers to go run back to work after short maternity leave. So sometimes a mother may need it, push it for her own psychological stability to get out of the house. Sometimes she needs it because there's 2 jobs. They need 2 jobs to support the family, to pay for the bills. And even then it's a challenge. But sometimes it's part of a modern distortion that having a job outside of the house is somehow more important than holding that baby. But today we know that attachment is the foundation for everything. And the deepest forms of attachment, or the lack of it, are formed in the earliest time after birth. So there's nothing greater for a mother and father to do than provide attachment for that infant, because I would say, most scholars in this field say that most of our wounds as we develop is attachment wounds. There was some wound in our attachment as an infant. There's avoidant attachment, there's absent attachment, there's confusing attachment. You know, the mother is on and off, the father is on and off. There's no attachment. And all this creates scars in the development of our brains, which the Nefesh Habahamis is going to have to deal with. Why am I talking about mothers leaving their children? I forgot. Oh, so David HaMelech says, Nafshi kegamul alei imoi, like that safety of the child in the bosom of its mother. You know, that's how he felt. So in a relationship of the Nefesh Elikis, there's no defenses. Because the Nefesh Elikis is Elikus. So I'm not busy defending. I don't have to be defensive. I trust you, you trust me. That's the foundation of all relationships. And then in that itself, there's the Nefesh, there's the Ruach, there's Neshama, there's Chaya, there's Yechida. So Yechida is the core of the Nefesh Elikis, Yechida leyachtach. There's nothing, it's experiencing Einaid Mulvadai. And it includes everything. So there's no mitzvahs that you have to be mevatel. When Yechida opens up, when the fuse of Yechida gets turned on, the experience of life is absolute, blissful, infinite oneness. And there's no opposition. There's no like, but I disagree because I'm really a very bad person. The Nefesh Habahamis is not a bad person on your level of Yechida. Or look how ruined I am. I'm an incompetent person. Look how much fear I have. Everyone is part of that conversation because it includes the Nefesh Elikis, the Nefesh Habahamis. It's Yechida leyachtach. As he says, there's no Metzias outside of Atzmos. But then you have lower, different frequencies of the Nefesh Elikis. There's the way it's chaya. Chaya is, it sees. There's a clarity there. It's not yechida, but there's a clarity. So its relationship to Nefesh HaBahamis is one with absolute clarity. Because we're not in a debate. Neshama, there's already debates, there's conversations. And it's important. It's not a debate doesn't mean you lose. A debate means I have to listen to the other side. You have to listen to what the Nefesh HaBahamis says. That's the avodah of Neshama. Because you want to talk to the Nefesh HaBahamis. And then there's the avodah of Ruach, there's the avodah of Nefesh. Each one is an avodah. And I can't just wake up in the morning and say, I'm just in Yechidah. Real Yechidah is not afraid of Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama. Yechidah is the essence of all of them. Right? So even in Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, I can hold on to the Yechidah. You're before Klois HaNefesh, after Klois HaNefesh, or middle of Klois HaNefesh. Yeah.
That's like the secret to prayer, right?
Yeah.
So are we getting the secret to Yehidah is Chassidus? Is that what
Yeah. So that's the truth. In Yiddishkeit, a person reflects Torah, Torah reflects a person. So in Yiddishkeit, you touch on something very beautiful. We have different dimensions of learning Torah. It's known Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Sod. So it says in Kabbalah, in the writings I read, Pshat is Olam HaAsiyah. It's the frequency of Asiyah, and that's its power. It's the literal interpretation. In other words, it deals with the world on a concrete level. And then you have Remez, Drush, and Sod. Remez and Drush, that's Olam HaYitzir and Olam HaBriyah. Sod, which is Kabbalah, is Olam HaAtzilus. What do we mean by this? Different levels of Torah explore and relate to different dimensions of the universe. Like if you open up a book of Kabbalah and it speaks about tefillin, it doesn't speak about how to make the black boxes. For that, you look at Shulchan Aruch, how to make the boxes. And how to write the letters, and what to write, and what makes it possible. That's what Shulchan Aruch is. That's Olam HaAsiyah. And that's the tefillin that I have to put on. If I put on tefillin only in Olam HaAtzilus, I'm not mekayim the mitzvah of tefillin. I have to eat matzah, that actually my teeth can say, "Ow, the matzah is delicious this year," etc. But when Kabbalah talks about tefillin, right, the Arizal will say, you're being mamshech dalad moichen. You're being mamshech chachma and bina, and then das has chesed and gvura, and kadesh is chachma, and v'hoye kiviyach is bina, and shma is chesed, and v'hoyim shema is gvura. One said, I thought I'm putting on black boxes. Yeah, you're right. On an Asiya level, it's a black box with Parshas inside. On an Atzilus level, it's the energy of chachma and bina and chesed and gvura that you just connected to your brain and to your heart. So there's never a contradiction, there's just different layers of reality. Just like when I take a microscope and I look at this very table or this very tissue, I'm going to see deeper dimensions of the tissue. It doesn't mean it's not a tissue. Doesn't mean it's not a tissue. It means based on the instruments you have, you will perceive a different level of reality. But ultimately, the tissue is a real tissue. God wanted this tissue. Because the fact that we live in this world and we see a tissue is supposed to be a tissue.
So what's on the level of Yechidah?
Ah. So Chassidus is Yechidah. Teres HaChassidus, that's Yechidah Shabbatayit. It's the fifth level. And what's the Nekud of Yechidah? Nekud of Yechidah is never, Yechidah doesn't negate Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chai. If Yechidah is competing with the other four, it's not Yechidah. That's how you know you're not Yechidah. Whenever I'm in competition with other people or other Jews or other parts of Torah, it's not Yechidah. It's not oneness. I'm busy competing. It doesn't compete with Nefesh, doesn't compete with Ruach, doesn't compete with Neshama, doesn't even compete with the Nefesh HaBahamis. It's a place where everything comes together. Atzmus Ein Sof. So it's the etzem, it's the core, and in the core you have everything, because it's the core of everything. You're not gonna. There's no place where etzem is not there, because if it's a place that etzem is not there, it's not etzem. The ultimate truth is the truth of everything. So it's the truth of Nefesh, the truth of Ruach, the truth of Neshama, the truth of Chaya. If it's only truth of Yechidah, then it's not Yechidah.
That's why Mikol Adam, you can learn from all Mamish.
Mikol Adam. Ezer Chacham Alamed Mikol Adam, yeah.
So that's there already.
The totality of the person. Like he says before, there's no Metzias that you have to be Mavatal. Because every Metzias is experienced from Yechidah and in Yechidah, and over there it's Atzmus Ein Sof. So here all the parts of the person are lechatchila one. So it's not a question of bittul hayesh, bittul b'metzias. It's not even a question of bittul. The word bittul even doesn't apply. That's the fifth cup of Pesach. You have the 4 cups that we drink, and you have the kais shel Eliyahu, that's the kais connected to Geula. Mashiach is Yechida. That's the 5th level. That's kais chamishi. We don't drink it yet because it's Yechida shebenefesh. HaChamishis l'pareh. The 5th son, very good. So the 4 sons, it says that Arizal, the 4 sons is Atzilus, Bri, Yitzir, Asiyah. Chacham is Atzilus, Rasha is Asiyah. You have to always keep those 2 together. Because Atzilus could influence Asiyah, it doesn't get stuck. And then you have Tam, Sheni, Yedei, Elishal is Bria and Yitzir. That's what it says in Kisvei Arizal. The Rebbe used to speak about the 5th son who doesn't come to the Seder. At least the 4 come to the Seder. And I would say that the 5th son brings out the Yechidah shebenefesh. And the only way to bring out the 5th son back is if you reach him with Yechidah shebenefesh. Because in Yechidah shebenefesh, there's no alienation. There's no alienation. So in many ways, the reason our generation has so many of the 5th sons is to help us stimulate our own Yechidah shebenefesh. In Yechidah shebenefesh, it's not just I'm not defensive. It's much deeper than that. Every real relationship is no defenses. You can't have a relationship if my defenses are up. If I sit down with you and there's no complete transparency and trust, our relationship is very superficial. That's why trust in a marriage is everything. Without trust, we don't even begin to connect. It's all fake. I mean, it may be better than a 3rd World War, but it's like 2 diplomats sitting by a convention in the United Nations. You know what that looks like? Yechidah is where there's a complete achdus that's rooted in Ein Sof. It's Yechidah liyachtach. So b'meila, when you talk about Torah, we literally have different layers of Torah. They all touch a different spectrum of reality. And everyone is rich ad infinitum, because it's all Chacham of Ein Sof. But it's the way the Ein Sof comes into Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya. Remember, Ein Sof comes into Yechidah Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya. And then there's the pristine element of Yechidah. And over there it's Yechidah liyachtach. And that's the energy that people feel when they learn Chassidus. What's the energy? What is it? It's not another vort, it's not a pshat in the pasuk. You have Rashi, you have Ramban, you have Klayoko, you have Chaim, you have Seforno, you have Ralbag, you have Radak. Right? You have the Medrash. And each one, it's infinitely rich, because it's Torah Hashem. What Chassidus is Megal is the Yechid in Rashi, the Yechid in the Ramban, the Yechid in the Gemara, the Yechid in Tais, the Yechid. And the Yechid never competes with Pshat, never competes with Remez. It doesn't have to put something down in order to become who it is. Because it's not defined by a realm, it's not defined by a color, it's not defined by Pshat, Remez, Drush, Sod. It's the essence of the Pshat, it's the essence of the Remez, it's the essence of the Drush, it's the essence of the Sod. It's the core, it's the DNA, the atzmius of everything. Where is DNA? Where is it? Is it in my hair? Is it in my teeth? Is it in my fingers? Is it in my heart maybe? It's only in my brain. It's in the serious limbs. It's in my liver. It's in my kidneys. It's in my nails. And what's the answer? How could that be? Come on, you're comparing a strand of hair. You're comparing a tooth to the brain. You're comparing it to the heart. The answer is etzem. The Baal Shem Tov says from Reb Sadia Gaon, Taka, ha'etzem k'shata toifes b'chelki ata toifes b'kulei. Etzem, if you get a bit of it, you got all of it. Nobody understood what the Baal Shem Tov meant. What's that? If I take the etzem of this tissue, I have the whole tissue. It's a joke. When you're talking on the DNA, we have a mashal for it. When you're talking about that level of the body, so you could give me the tiniest strand of hair, right? It has everything. On the level of etzem. On the level of nerves, no. Sorry, the hair doesn't have nerves. You could cut your hair, I'm not going to scream. You can cut my nails, I'm not going to scream. Everybody understands that certain limbs are more vital than other limbs and more essential to life, etc. But on the level of DNA, every nekuda, if you're part of the organism, every nekuda has the whole etzem. Because what is DNA? DNA is literally the blueprint for the entire body, not just for one strand of hair. It's the entire source code, exactly. And DNA is not busy competing with each other. If DNA is competing with each other in an organism, then we have some serious issues, because it's one. On the level of etzem of Torah, kshatatoif is bechel, kshatatoif is bekulai. Every nekuda of it is everything. It's toif is bekulai. So that's the pchin of yichida. Can we learn one more paragraph? Okay, let's learn one more paragraph. Ches. והנה מצד העניין דזה אלום הזה עושה אלוקים, הרי כשם שישנה אלום הזה לנגד הבחינס נפש רוח נשמה, כמו כן ישנה גם אלום הזה כנגד הבחינס דחי יחיד שזהו עניינו של Amalek. Now we come to Amalek. Since everything is אלום הזה, so just like you have אלום הזה, you have unholiness when it comes to nefesh ruach neshama, you also have something that tries to undermine chaya and even yechida. And that's where Mr. Amalek comes in. Chutzpah v'gaiva b'loy taga. Amalek represents chutzpah and arrogance, b'loy taga. The Gemara has an expression, you can be taga means a crown in Aramaic, a keser. You can be a king without a crown. That's what Amalek wants to be. Chutzpah without a crown. Meaning, I'm not competing with you based on any rationale. There's two forms of gaiva, two forms of arrogance. That's why it says, Ki ga'oi ga'a. In the Shiras Hayam, in the Song of the Sea, they speak about Parai, right? In the beginning. What's the lashon over there? Az Yashem Ashira Lashem Ki ga'oi ga'a. I'm going to sing to Hashem because He is exalted above the exalted. So Zelu Umazeh also, there's ga'oi ga'a. There's gaiva, that's one type of ga, and then there's goi ga. There's gaiva, even legabe gaiva. It's a different level. Gaiva sheyesh lehavana b'seichel, v'gaiva leloy tam. There's gaiva that can have some rational justification. And then there's a gaiva that doesn't need reasons. Gaiva sheyesh lehavana b'seichel, ikamasher kasav al-yishal, l'chachem b'chachmasei, asher ba'ashrei, haynu shaliyosei, asher v'chaysh v'asher koichi v'yitzim yadi yasali yasachai lazah, ayafilu k'shemagi la'asaga v'akadosh zeh mashnit l'imel ma'ila v'afal b'kein chaysh v'zeh magi v'yachal l'tfeya b'zraya, hinem zeh bola de yashes v'gaiva. There's an arrogance where you're a talented fellow. You're a celebrity. People go crazy about you. You're getting validation from the whole world. You have 9 million likes for every stupid clip you send out. Right? So you start telling yourself, you know what? I'm smarter and better than most people.
At least there is a substance.
There's something there. You're a talented fellow. You're I don't know, beautiful, charismatic, interesting. You made a lot of money. It didn't happen from nowhere, right? Your ingenuity is incredible. Your work ethic, your charisma, your fearlessness. You built companies. You're a tycoon, and you look at it and you say, you know what? When this person walks into the room, right? Everybody, and you start taking it seriously. It's a miserable life, but I can see how it happened. That's what the Navi says. Don't. Al yishal chacham b'chachmasei. Let the chacham not start becoming arrogant because of his wisdom, or the wealthy man because of his wealth. You start thinking it was my strength, koichi v'otzim yadi, my credit, my strength, my brilliance, my resourcefulness, my looks, my handsomeness. And he says, even a person who knows that it was a gift, but he says, you know what, I deserve it. And this creates a relationship to life, one of yeshes and gaiva. I walk around with ears around me, and I walk around with a sense of an inflated sense of self. It's a very difficult life to live because you're so dependent on validation. But this we can understand how it happens. You know, you're the talk of the town. You own this and you own that. Nobody makes a move without you. You know, I want to go into Google, I need you. I want to go on Facebook, I need you. TikTok, I need you. Instagram, I need you. Even when I want to go to Borough Park on Waze, I need you. Because you created Waze. Or etc., whatever the type of chachma and gvura it is. V'kivan shegai v'zudim sheches ben ha-seichel, azay ha-malchama kenegdu bituli yicholim gam ken lova adei ha-seichel. Since there's some substance behind this gaiva, I can also lead you out of it. I can show you how things happened, how things occurred. In fact, your neighbor in class, your classmate, you know is much smarter than you. He didn't make it. He also worked harder than you. He also started off in the basement, right? And he's working in a grocery store. If he could make ends meet, he's happy. You could show a person how things work. You can also show them the results of gaiva. Look what happened to your marriage. Look what happened to your children. Look how many escapes you have. Look how crazy you became. Look how many real relationships you have. You can talk people into it, you can talk them out of it. At least you can begin having a conversation that will cast doubt in their head and will bring them on a journey towards bittul, towards healing. It's a journey, but it's a journey where there's a conversation. The Gemara has an expression, there's gaiva, where the arrogant person is actually poverty-stricken. There's a level of chutzpah that is not tuning in to any facts. It's a level of chutzpah that absolutely doesn't have to have any reason, any justification, any substance. So sometimes people lie, and they have such an audacity, they don't need any facts, they don't have to deal with anything. I'm just lying for the sake of lying without any feeling of conscience that I have to be committed to truth. This is a level of gaiva and chutzpah. It tunes into a space of arrogance that doesn't need any justification. This don't be it bevatel through seichel. It didn't come through seichel. It's not going to leave through seichel. It's not shaykh to seichel. You're talking seichel, you're talking to the wrong person. It's like you try to convince a horse to come to the shear. I mean, what was
Irrational hate.
irrational hatred? What's irrational hatred? Talk and talk and talk and tell me you're a good guy. Yeah, the more you tell me you're a good guy, the more I see how weak and stupid you are, and I'll kill you even better. I'll kill you more with more efficiency. And you have to know it when you see it. The worst thing you can do is negotiate and seichel, and they'll talk you out of it. It's a different level. V'zeu klolos inyan da Amalek. This is Amalek. As we learned earlier, there was a hot bath. Everybody was in awe of the Jewish people. ובשביל זה לא מספיק עבודה שמצד נפש רוח נשמה בלבד, כי ליועסם כויחס פנימיים הקשורים עם הבנה והשגה והם מדידה והגבלה, יכולים לפעול רק בעניינם הקשורים עם מדידה והגבלה. מה שאין כבנוגע לעניין שאין בהגבלס וטיימם וכדי להילחם בעמלק, צריך להיססר את כויחס המקיפים של נפש אלוקis חיה יחידה. When you're dealing with Amalek, you must have chaya yechida. Why? Because Amalek represented every rational person would stay away from what Amalek did. He destroyed himself. He couldn't help himself. The irrational hatred of Amalek, that level of arrogance and hatred is beyond what you can explain. So now you're starting to explain to Amalek, all he sees is that you're taking him seriously and you're weak. So it motivates him to do it further. What is this in a person's life? We also have this inside. So when a person has this level of Amalek, it's not enough nefesh ruach neshama. Nefesh ruach neshama works in a limited way because it's behislapshus. It works with your mind, it works with your heart. So you can affect things that also have a measurement. But things that have no measurements, they defy comprehension, they defy reason. So now when I need to get through to them, I have to go to a level of chaya yechida. Sometimes there are obstacles in a person, there's darkness in a person that with nefesh ruach neshama I will not be able to penetrate it. The person needs to come with the koyach of chaya and even more with the koyach of yechida to be able to deal with Amalek. And that's what he's going to continue, what that means in a person's life. What does chaya yechida look like and how does it affect the Amalek inside of us? Be'ezer Hashem will continue on Monday morning, 7:45 a.m. Shabbos, we have our regular schedule of shiurim. Everybody have a beautiful day and a gewaldige Shabbos. And we see the Gilui HaYechida in the whole world. Thank you to the Yeshivas Adar Torah for coming and gracing us.
For the interview I had with Richard Schwartz.
Ah,
Really loved it. He got the title.
they sent it to him, I think. The guy said I'll send
The
him.
results. It was more like how the Scaffia happened to the Udu for himself.
The what?
The Scaffia had to do it.
The Scafia.
Not from the part of putting yourself down, from a part of self.
When the Scafia is done from the self, it's a different Scafia.
I never, when I heard his Mahalach at IFS, I always thought that no, you can't do Scaffia. I like, at this point I'm really like, no, sometimes you could say,
I'm going to come back to you.
Yeah. I liked it.
Yeah.
What's the other sheet you did? I want to reference back to it.
Let's share where?
You did on No Bad Parts IFS.
IFS?
What was the name of the sheet?
If you go to the yeshiva.net, put in search IFS, probably 3 or 4 shiurim will come up.
Okay. Yeshiva.net?
Theyeshiva.net, and put in the search IFS, and probably 3, 4, 5 shiurim should come up. I did a Taldesak of Yosef, I did with him. We did a few of them. You're studying it now? You're studying it? And you're into it, okay?
Thank you for bringing in the first blood of Baba Mitzia.
Avada. Has it?
Talking about reason that a person could see something. The first blood over there talks about whether or not you can accept a person.
Rosh HaMetzia.
Yes, I'm saying that you're
Yeah. Yeah, Tviyas Ayin, yeah.
Rabbi, you mind if I take a picture with you?
No, not at all. Not at all. With pleasure. A lot of atzlach and good Shabbos, good Shabbos, good Shabbos. Tzlach Rabbi Rav Avram. Huh? Which nekudah was transformational for you?
The
Yes.
Nekuda of Yechida, the Chibuk, the Dveikus.
No, we're
Because
not do something.
I found that, with Chaverim especially, for me it's with Chaverim, and with my mother as well. Father also, but not on a little different level. With my mother, I felt the Chibur and Dveikus even beyond her death. Her death was for me just some kind of event which in a way was not even almost
Wow.
in the realm of real life.
Wow.
So I have such a chibuk with her
Wow.
that
So you don't need DNA certificates.
I don't need
DNA.
but it's even I don't need even the timeline where it's she was born here. This is like beyond
Right, wow.
So, and I feel this Vegas and chibuk with Chaverim. It's not for no reason. Like when you meet the real hammer. I mean, maybe it's in Russian culture. But we embrace each other and kiss each other, and the Vegas never stops. And so what's good about this, like, I have a friend who's like a misnagid, but he's not misnagid. He's not connected. He's Litvish. But we have such a love for each other. We have completely different seichel, in totally different ashkol.
That's amazing.
And the Vegas we have is like
That's
unreal.
powerful.
So
It goes to a deeper place.
it's a much deeper place. He and me, we understand that because we grew up together. I mean, it's just.
Wow. Right.
But that's the
On a level of Yechida, there's a different type of dvekas.
completely.